Yes, sir.
You say he's a private investor. Did he fund the whole thing?
No, I could talk about the financials. $700,000 purchase price, okay? $700,000 purchase price. The owner wanted 25% down, negotiated him down to 17% down, so it was $133,000. Took a private money loan out for $133,000, plus an additional $35,000 for improvements, upgrades, expenses that I knew were going to be there because I had quotes on before I closed. Showed them to my investor, showed him where the property is, where it's going to be, paid them an 8% monthly return. They get a second on the property. The owner's in first position. I save the owner thousands of dollars in taxes because he owns it free and clear. Pay him an interest rate, I think it's at 6.5%. And it's a 30-year amortization period with a 4-year balloon. And at the end of 4 years, this property is going to be worth maybe $1,050,000. And I bought it at $700,000. It's worth about $950,000 today. So it's only going to go up because the market's there and nobody's going to build because we're buying this thing below market value or below replacement cost. So does that answer the question? Okay.
Is that a one empty story?
What's that? Oh, that's a 1. That's a 1. Anybody else have any other questions? Yes.
Are you able to tie down the property with a letter of intent?
A letter of intent. Most letters of intent are non-binding. There could be binding letters of intent, but the majority are non-binding.
So you cannot, with just a letter of intent, you're not able to lock the property.
In most cases.
Well, yeah, when you're sending across a letter of intent, I mean, technically, once again, it's kind of protocol to send a letter of intent, which kind of explains it, and it's a negotiating point, and again, 1 to 2 pages, but rates and terms that the purchase agreement is coming after that, lets us know that we're serious about it, that we're not just tire kickers, and engage them in that process, and shortly after that, a purchase agreement is coming. So, I mean, this should be a short window of maybe 1 to 2 days once that letter of intent is over to counter back and get that worked out, and then the purchase agreement comes over with the rest, and that's going to follow very closely behind it. Well, it's technically not locked. It's not binding. It's non-binding, and so they can still sell it to somebody else. They can still sell it to somebody else. The letter of intent is non-binding.
What are the demographics around here?
Demographics, good question, and they were bad. They were. Like Scott said, downtown Detroit, greatest storage market in the country. Here, everybody's moving in with mom and dad, and people are dropping out of college and coming back home. And the population has decreased a couple thousand people, each year for the last 10 years. Some industries moving out, but they're not going anywhere. All the storage occupancies are strong. So as much as demographics do matter, in storage, a little bit less because people still need to store their things.
So I mean, it's mostly residential.
In that area, there's a lot. You can get what you like to see is apartment renters, people who own, rent rather than own, because they're the people that are more likely to store. Exactly. So that's what you're looking for.
Could you give a timetable? The whole process, how long it took you to find it, how long?
We still got time?
Yeah.
Yeah. I initially, let's see,
And then you got it through mailer?
Correct. Yes, sir. I was in November. I sent out a mailer. I remember I went and visited the facility the day after Purdue lost to Duke in basketball. Because I like to.
We're going with the sports references again.
I like to schedule my business travel around sporting events because it's fun, and I mean I think they're both fun. But you can kind of do those things, like Scott said. You want to find a place to visit or invest that you know and like. That was November. Negotiations started in December after I visited the facility. December, January. That was the process of getting it tied up, things like that. Most of February was due diligence, and then putting the action plan together, and then we closed March the 24th. So not terribly long.
So from when you got say you did the LOI and negotiated everything?
4 months from the date they contacted me to the date we had it closed. 4 months, and the deal I have now, it's about 4 months as well. The deal I'm closing next month. Yes.
Be it the regulatory environment or whatever, is there any particular states that you simply don't want to do business in, any areas that you don't want to do business in?
I'm not an expert at that. I have people on my team that would advise me there. I'm sure there is. There's different states that have different laws, and
yeah. The question is there any area in which you wouldn't want to invest in? I guess the first thing that comes to mind is we've kind of somewhat shied away from areas where the land is leased, where we don't have total control over the ownership, where the land is leased and the building is built on that. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't enter into a transaction and purchase a deal where there's a land lease involved in it, but we just kind of like to have control over everything. And beyond that, I mean, if you're talking about environmental issues, we have phase 1 inspections if we think that there's any fear of that. There's really nothing that I can see, any challenges of any area in particular that would make me not want to buy a facility unless there was a river running underneath the facility. The question is population. Would you stay away from the very, very rural areas? You're going to have to pull from farther around. Your clients are going to come from a 5-mile radius. And I guess what you're going to run into there is if you really want to create value in this and you've got a goal of doubling the value within 5 years in those very rural areas with no growth at all whatsoever, it's really going to be organic growth. It's not going to be forced appreciation where you can steal a bunch of clients from somewhere else because you may be the only game in town, or there may be one other competitor and there may not be any growth, and no matter what you do, it's just going to be slow and progressive, and you may not be able to build the buildings. It may take you several years to be able to do that. And so, if it's a good cap rate and it's cash flowing well when you get there, then that's fine. But if your goal is to double the value in 5 years in those far out areas, those rural areas, it's probably not going to happen because there's just not a lot happening in those areas. Let's take one more question before we take a quick break and then bring Zach on, okay? One more question.
Casey, I had a question back in financing. You said you got a $133,000 private loan.
That was the down payment amount, okay? It was a total, the total private money loan was $165. That financed all my improvement costs, closing costs, upgrades, and things like that.
So that whole entire loan, was that used as the second, or did you have that part of it as the second tied to the property?
Yeah, correct. Basically, yes. That's a second mortgage. You write a promissory note, you record it. They have a second in case you default next to the owner. So my cash flow that I pay to the owner who's carrying the mortgage is X amount. My private money loan is X amount, and then whatever my income minus my expenses is my cash flow, which is the $3,300. So, yeah, I mean, the financing when you have a private investor, Dutch gave a great presentation earlier on those, and I took notes on that one, and I'm definitely going to follow that because that's a great way to get them. And you know what? They're flexible. Everybody's flexible and negotiable, and you just got to find out what's important to them and what they want, and then you can kind of negotiate it around there. As long as you have somebody on your team that is familiar with that and knows how to structure it properly. So, yep.
All right, everybody, let's give Casey a round of applause. Is that a good deal or is that a good deal? That's a good deal. That's a home run, folks. That's what we need to be looking for, and that was put together just the way we taught them. Nice job, Casey.